Jace had always loved the quiet. Not the kind found in silence, but the kind born from noise. The hush that settled in between raindrops on concrete, the way footsteps softened under lamplight, the low hum of a city winding down. Fifth Avenue was wet tonight, the pavement slick and glittering under the street lamps. Jace adjusted the strap of his satchel and pulled his hoodie tighter around his ears. Another late shift, another night of restocking shelves and pretending not to exist behind the register. He didn't mind, not really. The bookstore had always been his sanctuary, even before it belonged to him. The world could be loud and unbearable, but there, among worn pages and quiet people, it gave him space to breathe. The bell above the door had jingled exactly 2 minutes before closing. He hadn't looked up at first. Most people didn't linger that late unless they were lost or lonely. But when he heard the soft scuff of sneakers and the hesitant way the customer browsed the poetry aisle, Jace's curiosity had won. It was him, the same guy who had been coming in for nearly a month now. Always late, always wandering, never buying. Messy curls, a sweater too big for his frame, a habit of tracing the spine of whatever book he was pretending to read. Jace hadn't meant to remember the details, but he had. Tonight, the stranger lingered longer than usual. And then, just as Jace turned the corner to lock up, the guy looked up, and their eyes met. For a moment, Jace forgot how to move. There was something about the guy's face. Not beautiful in a polished way, not striking, but kind. Earnest. His green eyes had a shine that made Jace's stomach twist with something sharp and soft at once. "Sorry," the man said, stepping back with an awkward smile. "I keep doing this. Coming in too late." Jace blinked. "It's fine. You've got 5 minutes. I think I've had 5 minutes every night this week." Jace found himself smiling faintly. "Then maybe it's time to buy a book." The guy laughed, quietly, like he wasn't used to being heard. "I guess that's fair," he said. "I'm Micah." Jace hesitated. "Jace." Micah nodded like the name meant something. "You always look like you're about to disappear into the shelves," he said. Jace blinked. "And you always look like you're waiting for something." They both stood in that thin line between sarcasm and honesty, suspended in the quiet of an almost closed bookstore. Outside, rain began to fall again. Micah looked toward the windows. "Guess I'm stuck here for a bit." "You could always buy an umbrella," Jace offered dryly. "I could," Micah said, stepping closer, "but then I wouldn't have an excuse to talk to you." That silenced Jace. The room felt smaller all of a sudden. He didn't know what to say to that. So instead he turned, walked behind the counter, and gestured to a worn wooden stool. "Sit," he muttered, "while I lock up." Micah obeyed. And that night, for the first time, Jace didn't close the door right away. He let the rain fall, and he listened to Micah talk. About nothing. About everything. And the bookstore, for once, didn't feel quite so empty. By the time Jace opened the store the next morning, he had convinced himself it hadn't meant anything. Micah had just been polite, friendly, maybe a little flirtatious, but that didn't mean anything. People talked to pass time all the time. That didn't make it personal. Didn't make it real. Except Micah had stayed. Long after closing, long after the rain stopped, they had sat on opposite ends of the counter and just talked. About bad poetry and worse landlords. About favorite colors and songs they never admitted to liking. About loneliness in the quiet sideways way only two strangers could. And somewhere between one laugh and the next, Jace had forgotten to guard his edges. Now, in the early gray of morning, the bookstore felt different. Like something had changed. Or maybe like something had finally woken up. He was halfway through arranging a new display when the bell above the door jingled again. He didn't expect anyone this early. So when he turned and saw Micah, rain-damp curls falling into his eyes and 2 steaming paper cups in hand, Jace froze. "I brought coffee," Micah said, holding one out like an offering. Jace didn't move at first. Then slowly, wordlessly, he stepped forward and took the cup. Micah offered a sheepish smile. You look like a guy who forgets to eat breakfast. Jace's voice was quiet. You remembered how I take it? Micah shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal. Black, no sugar. You said you hated when coffee tasted like candy. Right. Jace turned away to hide the warmth creeping into his face. They sat again, same place as last night, across from each other, like something familiar. Like something becoming a habit. Micah's eyes flicked around the shop. It's quiet here in the mornings. It's quiet all the time, Jace said, sipping his coffee. That's kind of the point. I like that, Micah murmured. I like the way quiet makes things feel more honest. Jace looked up. Honest? Micah nodded. Like, people don't need to pretend so much when it's quiet. Like you can actually hear what someone means instead of just what they say. Jace stared at him a second too long. He didn't want to admit it, but Micah was getting under his skin in ways that felt dangerous. Not loud. Not sudden, but like roots creeping into the cracks of a foundation he thought had long since hardened. Micah looked down, fidgeting with his cup. So, he said after a moment, am I weird for coming back here? Yes. Micah blinked, startled. Then Jace added, but I don't mind. Micah laughed. It was soft and real, and a little surprised. I'll take that as a win. They sat in silence after that. Not uncomfortable. Just quiet. Just present. And when Micah left an hour later, with the promise of, see you tonight, murmured like a secret, Jace found himself nodding before he could stop it. They're from that place down on 5th, he said, setting the brown paper bag on the counter like a peace offering. Still warm. Figured you might eat if someone else did the baking. Jace blinked. You assume a lot about me. I notice things. That was true. Too true. Jace hadn't said it aloud, but Micah had already figured out the rhythm of the store. And of him. He didn't ask too many questions. Didn't push when Jace grew quiet. He didn't fill silences with noise. He let them breathe. They ate on the worn couch in the reading corner. The overhead lights were dim, casting a soft glow across the shelves. And outside, the city blurred into streaks of gold and gray behind the front windows. Jace sipped his tea. Micah leaned back, ankles crossed, hands wrapped around his cup. You know, Micah said eventually, when I was a kid, I used to dream about owning a bookstore. Jace glanced at him. What happened? I grew up. He grinned, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Turns out that's not the kind of job that pays rent in this city. Jace hummed. You're not wrong, but this place... Micah turned his head, watching the rows of spines and the flickering shadow of the antique lamp. It feels like something out of time. Like it exists just because someone believed it should. Jace stared at him. Something about that sentence about Micah saying it like a quiet truth, not a compliment, made his throat tighten. Why do you keep coming back? Jace asked, before he could think better of it. Micah didn't answer right away. He looked down, thumb tracing the lip of his cup. Then, because this is the only place I feel quiet lately. Not lonely. Just quiet. The air shifted, slowed. Their knees brushed where they sat. Jace didn't move. Micah turned toward him slightly, not close enough to break the spell, but enough that Jace could feel the gravity of it. The heat beneath the conversation, the ache that came from too many nights spent with words unsaid. Is that okay? Micah asked, voice barely above a whisper. That I keep coming back? Jace stared at the shadow of his own hand on the couch. Then, finally, he nodded. Yeah, he murmured. It is. Outside, the city kept moving. Inside, they didn't need to. Not yet. The rain started just after midnight. It was soft at first, tapping gently against the windows, like fingers searching for entry. The shop was already closed. The "Sorry We're Closed" sign flipped, the streets outside emptying of footsteps and headlights. Jace sat behind the counter, half-heartedly flipping through a shipment catalog, while Micah browsed the shelves like he wasn't planning to leave anytime soon. Eventually, Jace looked up. You waiting for the storm to stop? Micah shrugged, holding a book in one hand and an unreadable expression on his face. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just not in a hurry to go back to an empty apartment. That answer struck a little too close to home. Jace leaned back in the creaky stool, watching him. The light framed Micah's profile, his unruly curls, the curve of his jaw, the way his sweater hung loose at the sleeves. He looked soft around the edges, like someone still drying off from an old sorrow. Jace set the catalog down. "You live alone?" Micah gave a humorless laugh. "Always have. Roommates didn't work out. Too many people in one place makes me feel like I'm drowning." Jace tilted his head. "Then why are you always in here?" A pause. A smile. "You're different," Micah said simply. Silence. Jace's fingers curled around the edge of the counter. "Different how?" Micah walked closer, slowly, like he didn't want to spook the moment. He stopped just a few feet away, close enough that Jace could smell the faint trace of rain and cinnamon muffins on him. "You don't ask too much. You don't fill the air with noise. You just let things be. You let me be." Jace swallowed. His chest ached, unfamiliar and tight. Maybe it was the rain, or maybe it was the way Micah looked at him, like he could see the parts Jace didn't show anyone, the pieces that had cracked and bent under years of silence. Jace stood, slowly, and came around the counter. He stopped when they were face to face. "You don't have to pretend here," he said softly. "Not with me." Micah's eyes flickered, just for a second, like a spark trying to catch. "Good," he said quietly, "because I'm tired of pretending." And just like that, the space between them disappeared. Not with a kiss, not yet, but with something heavier. A shared breath, a glance that lingered a little too long, a truth exchanged in silence. The rain kept falling, but neither of them moved. The storm lingered into the early hours, wind rattling the windows and thunder murmuring low like a restless dream. Micah didn't leave. He didn't ask if he should. And Jace didn't suggest it. At some point, Jace brought out 2 chipped mugs, one filled with peppermint tea, the other with something stronger. Micah took the tea without a word, cupping it like a precious thing, letting the steam brush his cheeks. They sat on the old couch in the corner of the shop. The only light came from a single lamp behind them, throwing soft gold over old wood and unread books. The silence between them was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was a silence built on trust, not absence. Jace watched the way Micah's sweater slipped off one shoulder, exposing a sliver of skin. The way his fingers curled loosely around the mug, nails short and bitten. He looked tired, but not in the way of someone lacking sleep. More like someone who'd carried something heavy for too long. Micah broke the silence first. "I used to read under the blankets as a kid. Flashlight. Stolen books from the library. It felt like a secret world, safer than the one outside." Jace turned his head slightly. "What happened to that world?" Micah gave a small smile. "Life happened. My mom left. Dad drank. Books stopped being an escape and started being a reminder." Jace didn't speak. He just reached out, slowly, carefully, and placed his hand over Micah's where it rested on the couch. Micah looked down at their joined hands, surprised. "I'm not good at saying things," Jace murmured. "But I listen. I see you." Micah's throat bobbed as he swallowed. His voice was thick when he spoke again. "You always look so still, Jace, like nothing could ever move you. But I think that's just what you want people to think." Jace's lips parted slightly. His chest felt tight again, the way it always did when someone got too close, too real. "I don't know how to let people in," he admitted. Micah shifted closer, their knees brushing. "Then let me be the first," he whispered. Their faces were inches apart now. Not touching, but close enough that Jace could see the way Micah's eyelashes trembled, the soft flush in his cheeks. "Tell me to stop," Micah said, voice barely audible. But Jace didn't. Instead, he leaned in slowly, slow enough to let Micah pull away if he wanted. He didn't. Their lips met in the quietest kiss imaginable. Soft. Searching. Like a question asked in the dark. When they pulled apart, neither of them spoke. because in that moment, nothing needed to be said. Morning came softly, like the world had agreed to be kind for once. Jace woke to the scent of coffee and the distant hum of a kettle. For a moment, he forgot that anyone else was here. His body was curled on the couch, a throw blanket half falling off one shoulder, the room filled with that golden early light that always made the bookstore feel like a dream. Then he saw Micah in the kitchen, barefoot, hair messy, wearing one of Jace's hoodies. And it hit him like a wave. He had let someone in. Micah turned around and grinned sleepily. "Hey, I didn't want to leave. Didn't feel right." Jace sat up slowly, pushing a hand through his hair. "You made coffee?" "Burned the first pot, but the second one might be passable." There was a pause. Then a smile tugged at Jace's lips, unwilling but real. "You look ridiculous in that." Micah looked down at the hoodie. "You mean amazing." Jace didn't reply, just stood and walked into the kitchen, too aware of how domestic it felt, how natural. Too natural. Micah poured 2 mugs and slid one across the counter. For a while they stood like that, drinking quietly, stealing glances. And then Micah said, "Last night, was that a mistake?" Jace looked at him, the words catching in his throat. "No," he said at last. "But it scared me." Micah nodded. "Me too." The air shifted. "Do you want to talk about it?" Micah asked gently. Jace shook his head, but then surprised them both by saying, "I used to think love was a myth, something broken people made up to explain why they stayed." Micah's smile faded a little. He stepped closer. "And now?" Jace didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair behind Micah's ear. His fingers lingered there, trembling slightly. "I don't know what this is," he whispered, "but I keep wanting to find out." Micah leaned in then, slower this time. His mouth brushed against Jace's jaw, then lower, to his neck, just where his heartbeat pulsed beneath skin. Jace let out a breath that was almost a sound. It wasn't a kiss this time. It was more. A quiet unraveling. A surrender. Micah's hand slid under Jace's hoodie, finding the bare skin of his waist, fingertips tracing lines like poetry against his ribs. Jace's body responded before his mind could catch up, leaning in, pulling closer, wanting. Still, they didn't rush. They stayed like that for a long moment, pressed together, hearts speaking in the language of nearness, of warmth, of the terrifying comfort of being wanted. And when they finally parted, neither of them needed to ask what it meant. It had already become something real. That evening, Jace locked up the bookstore later than usual. The air was heavy with mist, the kind that coated glass in a fine sheen and turned the city lights into blurred halos. He didn't expect Micah to still be there, but he was. Micah sat in the corner armchair, legs tucked under him, a book in hand. Not reading, just holding it like the act itself was comforting. "You don't have to keep staying late," Jace said, flipping the deadbolt. "I won't kick you out." Micah looked up. "I don't want to leave." Something in his voice stopped Jace cold. Not the words, but the quiet tremor beneath them. Like staying wasn't a convenience, it was a need. Jace crossed the room, slid into the chair beside him. "Did something happen?" Micah hesitated, then set the book down. "My apartment's still there, but lately, it just feels empty. Too quiet. Like it's waiting for something I can't give it." Jace knew that feeling. All too well. "You're not broken, Micah." Micah looked at him, startled. "I didn't say I was." "You didn't have to." Silence stretched between them, and it wasn't uncomfortable this time. It was honest. Then Micah whispered, "You scare me, Jace." That made Jace freeze. "Why?" "Because I've never wanted someone to stay this badly. And that means you could hurt me more than anyone else ever has." Jace swallowed hard. "I scare myself too, because if I let myself love you, and you leave, I don't know what's left of me after that." Micah shifted closer, so close their knees brushed. "I'm not leaving." "You can't promise that." "I can promise I'll try." Jace met his eyes, and for the first time in years, he didn't try to look away. Micah leaned forward then, and when they kissed again, it was slow and deep and full of things neither of them knew how to say. It didn't burn like the first kiss. It lingered. It tasted of trust and longing and everything they'd been afraid of. They didn't go upstairs that night. They stayed in the back room of the bookstore, curled beneath a shared blanket. The warmth of bodies pressed together beneath the creak of old floorboards and the sigh of midnight air. No confessions. No expectations. Just the slow, quiet bloom of something new. Something real. The morning came too early. Jace stirred awake in the quiet back room, the soft rise and fall of Micah's breathing brushing against his shoulder. His hoodie was bunched beneath Micah's cheek, and one of Micah's hands had found its way to rest lightly over Jace's chest during the night. It should have felt peaceful. It should have felt perfect. But Jace couldn't breathe. He slipped out from beneath Micah, carefully, slowly, like breaking a spell. The bookstore was cold and dim, and he didn't bother turning on the lights. He needed air, distance, silence. The door shut behind him with a soft click. He walked for 10 minutes, then 15, down alleyways and side streets he knew too well. His mind was a mess of memories, snippets of the past tangled with the now, of the man who'd told him he was too cold to love, of the nights he'd slept on the couch with headphones on so he didn't have to hear someone walking away, of how familiar all of this felt, how terrifying. Running again? Came a voice behind him. Jace turned. Micah stood at the corner, his sweater zipped half up, curls wind-tossed, eyes unreadable. "I'm not," Jace started, but Micah cut him off gently. "You didn't even leave a note, Jace." "What am I supposed to think?" Jace looked away. "I didn't mean to disappear. I couldn't stay there. Not with you sleeping beside me like it meant something." "But it does mean something," Micah said, stepping closer. "Doesn't it?" Jace said nothing. "I've been patient," Micah continued, quieter now. "I haven't pushed. But I can't keep pretending I'm okay with being a placeholder for someone you already lost." Jace's breath caught. "That's not what you are." "Then what am I, Jace?" The street was empty, except for them. The wind picked up, sharp and damp. Somewhere, a bus hissed to a stop and rumbled away again. "You're the first person I've wanted to stay," Jace whispered. "And that scares the hell out of me." Micah blinked. "Then don't run." "I don't know how to stay." Micah's voice softened. "Then let's learn. Together." Jace looked at him, really looked, at the quiet strength, the gentleness he didn't understand, the stubborn warmth that refused to let him fall alone. And for once, he didn't run. He stepped forward. Micah met him halfway, pulling him into a slow, shaking hug that said more than either of them could have managed with words. They stood like that for a long time, on a quiet street corner, in the cold city wind, as if the rest of the world had paused to let them figure it out. It had been a week since that morning. Since Jace stopped running. Since he let Micah pull him into something terrifying and tender, and didn't pull away. Things didn't change all at once. They still slept on separate sides of the couch, still avoided using the word us out loud, but something had shifted. There was a softness now, a gravity. Jace found himself reaching out more, holding Micah's wrist a second longer, letting their knees brush beneath the table. Making coffee first, just to see Micah's crooked morning smile. He liked the feeling of being steady, of building something from the quiet up, but peace never lingered long. The bell over the bookstore door chimed one rainy afternoon. Jace looked up from the counter where he was restocking bookmarks, and froze. The man standing in the doorway wore an expensive coat and a familiar smirk, sleek, polished, and all teeth. His name hit Jace like a blow to the chest. "Eli?" Micah appeared from the back, coffee mug in hand. "Hey, I restocked." He stopped, took in the scene. "Hello, Jacey," Eli said smoothly. "Still hiding in this little cave?" Jace's mouth went dry. "What the hell are you doing here?" Eli stepped closer, ignoring Micah entirely. "I was in town. Thought I'd drop by. See what you've done with the place." It's quaint. Micah moved to Jace's side instinctively, his presence grounding, protective. Eli finally glanced at him. And you are? Micah, he said shortly. Jace's boyfriend. There was a beat of silence. Eli let out a low chuckle. You've always had a thing for strays, Jace. Micah stiffened. Jace felt his anger build, low and slow like a storm about to break. But for once, he didn't flinch. He didn't fall back into the old pattern of letting Eli twist the knife. Get out, Jace said. Eli blinked. Excuse me? You heard me. You don't get to show up and act like you still have a place here. You never loved this place. Or me. Eli scoffed. Is that what this is? Some low-rent romance with a guy who probably still lives with his mom? Micah stepped forward, but Jace gently put a hand on his arm. He loves me better in one day than you managed in 3 years, Jace said, voice calm. Now leave. Eli looked between them. Saw it. Whatever this was, real and rooted and beyond his reach. Then he turned on his heel and walked out, the bell over the door echoing in the silence he left behind. Micah exhaled slowly. That was him, wasn't it? Jace nodded. Micah set down his mug. You okay? No, Jace admitted. But I'm not afraid of him anymore. Micah took his hand. Squeezed. And Jace realized something. He didn't feel like he was standing in the ruins of something broken. He felt like he was starting over. It was nearly midnight when the power cut out. The city outside their apartment buzzed as usual, glowing like a sea of fireflies. But inside, the bookstore below and the apartment above were cloaked in quiet darkness. Jace blinked from the couch where he'd been reading by lamplight. The sudden silence felt thick. Too still. Then Micah's voice floated through the dark. Don't move. I know exactly where the candles are. A shuffle. A bump. A muffled curse. And then, flicker. Soft amber light bloomed from the candle Micah lit on the kitchen counter, his face glowing like something out of a storybook. His curls were messier than usual, and he looked proud of himself for finding the matchbox. Jace smiled. You're prepared for the apocalypse. I was a Boy Scout for like 3 months, Micah said, lighting a second candle. As more light filled the space, Jace stood and crossed the room slowly. They hadn't spoken much about that day, about Eli, but something had changed between them since. Jace found himself sleeping closer, touching longer, smiling more freely. He wasn't waiting for the next betrayal anymore. And tonight, with the hum of the city gone, just the sound of Micah's breath and the scent of wax and rain in the air, Jace felt something stir low in his chest. A kind of peace. Sit with me, Micah said, already settling cross-legged on the floor near the window. Jace joined him, their knees brushing in the candlelight. Micah's fingers tapped lightly on Jace's arm. You ever think about what would have happened if I never walked into your store that night? Yeah, Jace said softly. I'd still be scared of the dark. Micah smiled. You're not now? Jace shook his head. No, not when you're here. Micah reached up. His fingers traced the line of Jace's jaw, his touch reverent, unhurried. There was no heat behind it tonight, no rush of lust or urgency, just something deeper, something vulnerable and full. Jace leaned in slowly. Their lips met in a soft, barely there kiss. A second kiss followed, longer, truer. Micah's hand found Jace's, fingers threading together. And when they finally leaned back against the window, shoulders touching, candlelight flickering between them, Jace thought, I'm not afraid anymore. It had been 3 months. The shop was thriving again, not in the numbers, but in spirit. Customers lingered longer. New faces found their way in. And Jace, he smiled more now. He caught himself humming while restocking shelves, laughing at Micah's corny puns, kissing him when no one was looking, and sometimes when they were. Micah had moved in slowly, first his toothbrush, then a drawer, then all his sweaters, 1 week. By accident. It wasn't a big conversation. It didn't need to be. Jace just stopped noticing, when Micah's things became their things. Some nights they still stayed late, sitting behind the counter reading side by side, sharing the last cup of tea and the hush of a world asleep. One night Micah turned to him and whispered, "You think we'll still be like this in 10 years?" Jace tilted his head, heart squeezing. "Yeah, I do." Micah leaned in, pressed their foreheads together, and in that tiny perfect moment, after the bookstore had closed and the world had gone quiet, two people who had once been strangers, shadows in the dark, found home in each other. Not in grand declarations, not in perfect timing, but in small things, like fingers brushing, eyes holding, a love that bloomed after midnight and stayed until morning,